This is the start of the second recorded lecture here for zoology this spring. I hope that you've seen recorded lecture 1. That's always a good place to start. Start with 1 before 2. The first lecture was really about getting you excited about zoology, and I made a mention that it wasn't the time I thought that we should be discussing the syllabus and all kinds of mechanics of how the class works. That's this one. This is the lecture where I'm actually going to talk to you about the details of the class, what's going on, a little bit over the syllabus, certainly things that you could read on your own, and also some studying tips. And thus we've got some zoology on the left with Zoe and a little image of somebody studying and writing things down. For starters, I've got two things that are on the portal, two additional things. There are many documents there, and I've mentioned that I think in an email, an introductory email to you that I sent probably on the 6th of January. In any case, two of them that I want to draw attention to you are really very special. They're something that I've created. One is simply advice for people who are coming to college, and in particular Blackburn College, and in particular the biology department and working with me. It's freshman advice really for the culture, and I know that that can be a problem. I know that really, really well because no one in my family had graduated from a four-year school. That is, my parents or my siblings or my grandparents, etc. I did have an aunt that went to college, but nobody that I knew that I spent a lot of time with had gone to a four-year university before I went. And I was lost. I was really lost. I had no idea about what was going on. And so I've wanted to make that easier. And for more than 20 years, I've provided this advice. You might have gotten it last fall when we first met in August, where you met all of the biology professors if you were in the botany lab where we met. In any case, this is that advice, and I really, truly hope you take it to heart. I will tell you that other professors and even administrators at the college over the years have asked me to give it to them because they wanted to distribute it just as well. So I think you can count on it reflecting generally anyway some good practices. There are some details there that might vary amongst us as we practice as professors and as administrators and staff members, but I think it's good general advice. The second aspect that's there is something I wrote. It's a little longer, and it's study advice, and I've titled it As You Begin. Now, the things that are posted on the portal, for whatever reason, have a number associated with them. It's a separate column. And just to help you out, the professional practice is one I was just talking about, coming to college and transitioning. That's number 10 on the portal, and the As You Begin is number 6 on the portal. Now that one, which is I think several pages at least, is actually something that I wrote in 1992 when I first started college publishing. So I've written many college textbooks and study guides and instructor's guides and test banks, lab manuals. I had a textbook that I wrote and published in 94 and we used in this class for about 6 years. In any case, in all of my publishing and things, I wanted to write study advice, and that study advice was sold with the study guide that went out all across the country to probably more than 100,000 students who've looked at it. And what's particularly important for you is that when I wrote the advice, I was thinking about this class and my human anat and phys class that I teach, and I'll mention in just a little bit. So that advice is very much tailored to you and your current circumstances in this particular class. So I hope you read that over, and then today I'm actually going to extend it a little bit and tell you about some science that helps you to understand some physiological responses of the body and how we can better study and understand things. So that's to come. So today, going over mechanics of the class, the syllabus, making sure you know what's going to be going on as best we know as the circumstances change with this ongoing COVID threat. So I'll keep it posted. But based on what I know right now, I'm recording this on the 7th of January, a Friday of 2022. I'm going to tell you about how the class is going to be conducted right now with what we know. So everything's subject to change. Okay. So advice, mechanics of how the class is working, going over the syllabus, and then some additional study advice is what I have planned for this lecture too. One bit of professionalism, by the way, that I mentioned on professional practices is something I've already emailed. I mentioned it to you, I think, in my very first email, and that is always, with every professor, with every administrator, acknowledging that you've received an email. That's so important. Let me tell you, in addition to getting your own professionalism underway and refined and having a good impression with those you interact with, this helps you. Okay, so if I've sent out a notice and I'm seeing that I'm never hearing back from you, it makes me question, are you getting these emails? And as you get going here, we want to get all of you engaged. So it's a hint that you don't know what's going on. Now, it might mean that you know what's going on, but you don't bother to tell anybody that you're reading emails. You got to read the emails. And when they come from me, you darn well better read them, because it could be that I'm changing something important. Listen carefully. And that might be your only notice that an exam has somehow changed, the date, the time, the place, and you get to know one time, and it might be a 0 on a test because you didn't read an email. So this is the big times, guys. This is where we're generating a transcript, a college transcript, that really will follow you for the rest of your life. I was told that in high school, and the truth is, I don't think anybody ever looked at my high school transcript after they accepted me to the university. But for your college transcript, oh my gosh, that baby's going to follow you around. So you don't want to get bad grades because you didn't read an email and follow directions, okay? I think we're off to a great start. So many of you responded. I don't know that all of you have. So if you're one of those that haven't acknowledged my emails yet, boy, oh boy, now would be a good time to get going. Okay. Basics of the class. Let's go. Some things that I think are important as an introduction to the class. But I am not going to read a syllabus to you. I've always thought that's silly that people seem to almost read the syllabus together. I trust that you guys can read and understand things just fine. And I trust that after you listen to this presentation, that if you still have questions over how we're proceeding or what something means in the syllabus, that you will then send me an email or otherwise somehow get a question to me. Okay, so just for me really quick, I don't want to tell you a lot about my big background and bore you with it, but I teach here zoology, you know that now. I also have taught for the last 20 years a course called Evolution, and this year is the first year we're transitioning that class to Dr. Call. Now, it's not just because I am planning on retiring, but we want so that the 4 biology faculty here each teach an introductory course in your first 2 years at Blackburn. Your first 2 years at Blackburn, that's 4 semesters, and you have 4 biology professors. So right now, the way things are, in the fall, you start out with Dr. Bray. And in the spring of your freshman year, you have me in zoology. And then next fall, you have Dr. Welch for cell biology, BI 205. And then a year from now, we'd expect at the end of your sophomore year that you will be taking evolution. And that class now will be taught by Dr. Call. And that way, each biology professor gets to meet the freshmen or sophomores in these core courses that every bio major must take. Okay? And so that's part of the plan. I also have been teaching human anat and phys. It's a full year this year. And so right now, in addition to teaching zoology, I'm teaching the 2nd semester of human anat and phys. This is a fundamental class that's required for just about every health profession. It's tough because it has to address all this common knowledge that students should have, if they're going to medical school or going to veterinary school or going to be a nurse or a medical technologist or a physical therapist or an occupational therapist. I think you get the idea. That goes on and on and on. In the zoology class, I sent you out that Google form about your information, and I asked you if you were interested in a health profession. Um, I I actually don't know. That's an error on the screen right now. I don't have the number for what percentage of you are interested in health profession. That's actually a holdover from last year. But in most years, the number is 85% or more of bio majors in their freshman spring tell us that they're interested in the health profession. So that's a big deal. And I took on the leadership role about 20 years ago for being the chief health professions advisor. I go to national meetings where we're trained. Dr. Welch has attended. Unfortunately, he and I, the last meeting was a virtual meeting. It was in the summer of 2020 and it was COVID. But we go to professional training meetings, they're national meetings, where we meet with people from medical schools and vet schools and dental schools and optometry schools and all those, the deans and the admission staff. And they give us all sorts of advice on how to help you to prepare an excellent application after you graduate from Blackburn to get into one of these excellent health profession programs. And we've had tremendous success. I'll just brag as I'm finishing up my career here. Of my students interested in physical therapy, every one of my students who applied to the #1 program in the United States all got in. Okay, so every time we tried to get into the best, they got in. I don't know how you can do any better than that. In fact, every one of my physical therapy students who went on, as you have to get a doctorate in physical therapy, wherever they wanted to go, if it wasn't the #1 program, if they had another place they wanted to go, they got into all of those. So we've been doing a very good job, and our students have entered just about 20 different health professions. So I just rattled off a bunch of them right there. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, dental, optometry, vet, right? A regular MD physician, right? Chiropractor. It goes on and on. Imagine trying to rattle off 20 of those. Well, we have to be, as advisors, trained to help you, depending on whatever you're interested in. Of course, when I retire here at the end of May, I'll be stepping away from the college. I will remain an email resource or a phone call resource for anybody. I always like helping, but I may not be around as much. And I will be, of course, no longer working for the college. So I'll be off trying to find other adventures and things to do. Dr. Welch is expected to take over, and whoever my replacement is in the coming years will assume a role in health profession advising. Okay. I also teach advanced classes in comparative vertebrate anatomy. So in addition, in the human anatomy phys, we're considering humans. We dissect cats in that human anatomy phys class, and you'll see people dissecting cats this spring in the Zoolab. In my advanced comparative vertebrate anatomy, we dissect cats, sharks, and salamanders. In that class that was taught this last fall. And I also have been teaching a class that's very high level. It's a senior level class called Development, which fundamentally asks the question, you know that you started out as a fertilized egg, something we call a zygote. And then you know that you popped out of mom. And when you popped out of mom, you had a head and arms and legs and a heart and a liver and a pancreas and a digestive tract and a reproductive tract and kidneys and blood vessels, and the list goes on, and a brain. How on earth did a fertilized egg in 9 months turn into you? Maybe it came out a little earlier, maybe it came out a little later. How did that happen? How did one cell become all those different cells and different tissues and arranged into your body? And that's what I like to call the process of becoming. That's development. How did you become? How did you come about? How did you form? And development actually is lifelong, so it includes cancer biology and regeneration, Oh my gosh, is it an important class? And I hope that you have a good opportunity to take it with someone who knows a lot about developmental biology. If not, it's possible that you could take it in graduate school. So that's something that you could look forward to. Professionally, a little bit about my background. All of my degrees, as I mentioned in an email, are in zoology. My bachelor's and master's were down at Carbondale. I did not at all apply to Blackburn College, though I now know I probably would have got some really good scholarships. I was poor. My family was poor. I had to pay for college on my own, and I figured the only place I could afford to go was a state school. So I went down to Carbondale, where they have a zoology department. That was really good for me because I met a professor that I mentored with and got my master's with. Then I got my PhD in Washington State, all the way out there in the Pacific Northwest. And when I arrived in 1982 to get my PhD out there, Mount St. Helens, the volcano in Washington State, had erupted in 1980, killed a lot of people. You can read about it. The blast zone was sometimes as far as 10 miles away from the volcano, where giant trees were just toppled. Winds over 500 miles an hour. Okay, that's not tornadoes. Tornadoes don't get to be half that speed. 500-mile-an-hour winds, a wind with temperatures somewhere between 4 and 500. So imagine you're baking something in your oven really, really hot. You open that oven and maybe put your face near it to see what's in the oven, and you get blasted by that hot air. Imagine 400 is about the tops for an oven. Imagine 500-degree air going 500 miles an hour over a landscape, just toppling trees. It did not start fires. It's not fires. It just blew them down. And the whole area is devastated. And when I arrived in 1982, you had to have permits to go into really much of any area there. There was some limited area you could go. And the logging companies were just going in there, and as fast as they could, literally as fast as they could, they were dragging out these giant trees that were downed and using them for lumber. So there was a tremendous amount of lumber available. They didn't have to chop them down. They were just dropped. They had to just drag them out of there. So when I went in 82, I had to dodge logging trucks. And when I went in 1982, I was inside the blast zone by, maybe a couple miles. And I found salamanders that had survived the blast. Right next to where people died. In fact, when I went in one spot, it was a campground by a little small pond, and the people's clothing and campsite and materials were still there. Their bodies were gone, but all of their campsite stuff was still there. So it was a very sad time. And yet these salamanders survived. How do I know they survived? They were more than 2 years old, and salamanders are wet, and they could not migrate through 12 inches of ash and survive. So they couldn't have made their way in, and there were more than one. So that's something that I did out there in Washington State and doing some zoology. I've worked with salamanders. We have 2 species that are on our campus. So quite literally this spring in March, it's possible, March, April, maybe as early as the end of February, that some of you might see a salamander on campus. If you're in the physical plant at all and you're raking leaves in the spring or something, wet leaves, you might see salamanders on our campus. The big ones are tiger salamanders, and the small ones are all gray, and they are called small-mouthed salamanders. And I've done research with both of those, using sometimes animals from a campus. I'll tell you more about some research stuff I've done and some pretty cool stuff that we've been able to do with students over the years, but that's enough for right now. So I told you I was an advisor for health professions. I just needed to go through some more details there. Dr. Luth, some of you may have Dr. Luth. He is the person generally responsible for helping students interested in nursing. I think he also does other students as well. In fact, I know he does. He does chemistry students, of course. Dr. Welch and I have been advising for, as I said, about 20 total health professions. So depending on the math here, that might be 18 to 19 other professions, and Dr. Welch is going to be taking over. Of course, I can give you advice if you're interested in graduate school. I'll tell you a quick distinction here. that's important. And I'm not going to be around, guys, to give you advice in the semesters to come. So some things that I often tell students in advising, I want to toss out here. If you graduated from Blackburn with a bachelor's degree and you wanted to go on for more education, there are two different paths, generally speaking, that you can take. One is professional school, and that's where you might go to medical school or vet school or nursing. And professional schools usually lead to a professional license. You go to a professional school, and then later you have to take a test from a state or from the United States. And that test certifies you to be a professional something, veterinarian or physician or all kinds of other things. And going to professional schools leading to these medical kinds of fields, those are very expensive. Probably for most of you, I would think $100,000 might be at the lower end. Medical school could be $300,000 or more by the time some of you make it there. Now know that they provide loans for these amounts. And if you think about it, banks are happy to loan you money to go to professional schools because to get into a professional school is very competitive. So if you made it in, it must mean you're really, really smart and you're very likely to graduate and be a professional. And if you're going to be a professional and you're really smart, you're going to make a lot of money. So banks love to loan you money because you're going to be able to pay it back. But you need to know they're going to be expensive and you can get loans. So do not rule out a professional school because you think you'd have to save up for it. It's going to be loans, and so talk to somebody before you make a decision about that. The other path altogether is a graduate school. And a graduate school leads to a master's degree or a PhD. And I went bachelor's, master's, PhD, but many students now are skipping the master's and they go straight for a PhD that they may earn in as little as 4 years. That's pretty amazing to me. Here's the thing about graduate school. Graduate school just leads to a graduate degree, a master's or a PhD. Graduate school is selective too, and if you get into a particular graduate school, you can expect that they will pay you to go to graduate school. They will give you free tuition and they will pay you some job, maybe teaching laboratories or maybe conducting research, that will give you money to live on. Not a lot of money, okay, but enough. For example, so about 10 years ago, my son went to the University of Chicago chemistry graduate program to get his doctorate in chemistry. He has his doctorate in chemistry, and my son's name is Ben. And when Ben applied to lots of different places, he got lots of offers for graduate school PhDs. The offer he accepted 10 years ago was to pay him $85,000 a year to go to graduate school. Okay. Now, $55,000 was for tuition. So those of you that had calculus, 85 minus 55 leaves you with 30. And about 10 years ago, that's about what he was paid to live on to go to graduate school. He did not need to take out any loans, guys. This is altogether different. Now, there are some kinds of graduate programs, some in zoology, where you don't get paid and you would have to pay for graduate school, like a professional school. My advice is to really strongly consider programs where you have a high likelihood of getting paid. And when you get paid, it's called an assistantship. At graduate school, you want an assistantship. And how do you earn an assistantship? You get great grades in your freshman zoology class with Zalisco. You get a great letter of reference from everybody who's known you. You do some research if you can. That would be very, very helpful because graduate degrees are research degrees. And so those are the kind of experiences, and your advisors that you'll have in the years to come should be able to help you out. Okay. So why am I here? Why am I at Blackburn? Why have I stayed at Blackburn? When I came here initially, it was one of my first positions. I actually was at Southeast Missouri State University for 2 years. It was a temporary job. Then they offered my job permanently, and I had this choice, and I chose Blackburn over Southeast Missouri. And now I've stayed here for 33 years. One reason I've stayed here is because many of you, like me, do not come from families that have really gone to college often. So I didn't have that experience, and I really understand what that's like. And so I've written this advice for you, and I'm trying to give a very structured class to you, lots of details that we're going over today, so that you have good chances of success. So I really understand many of my students. Second, Blackburn has the work program, and this is so unique. I have 3 TAs that I'll tell you about in a little bit, and I get to work with those people very closely. They're just the brightest of the brightest, and what a treat. And I get to know you folks in a normal year when we see each other. Let's hope that happens. I get to know you and learn about you, and it's not me just talking to an audience, it's me talking to really my colleagues. You guys become my colleagues, my friends, and we're all in this adventure together. It's a chance to make a real difference, but not with a lot of students. One can have an impact, a small impact on many, or a large impact on a few. It's just the way time and energy goes. So I love being here, and I'm really committed to the mission of the college. So zoology is my first real chance to get to know you. All right, that's the big stuff. Let's talk now a bunch of details. This would be a really good time for you to maybe pause the video and find somewhere your syllabus and some of those documents that were on the portal. So you might want to get out the textbook objectives that are posted on the portal, and also get out the syllabus. So if you need to pause the video here, that would be a good thing to do. I don't need to pause because you guys can just pause the video. So let me talk through a few things we're doing, and this is, of course, what we understand we're doing right now, subject to change. Okay, so the word is tentative. Tentative means subject to change. It happens to be true about scientific knowledge, and we'll talk about the word tentative later when we talk about science. Okay, what do? Typically a Monday, we said already, this coming Monday is a celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King and what he means to us. So we aren't around for a lab intro. So the next video after this one that I'm going to have is going to be the lab intro for the phylum Porifera, and that's the sponges. Okay, but on a typical Monday, I have a quiz at the start of the lab period of the period, which is 11 o'clock in the morning. I start with a quiz over the prior week's lab. Okay. So the Monday after Martin Luther King Day, let me pull up my calendar and just make sure I got the dates right. The 24th of January will be when we have the quiz over the phylum Porifera. Okay. So on Monday, class will start with a quiz over the phylum Porifera, and then I will introduce the phylum that we'll look at the next day, which is Cnidaria. That's what I do on Mondays. So Monday is not a normal lecture day. It's something where we do a quiz at start and then a lab intro for the next day. Okay. Tuesdays, we have all of our labs on Tuesdays. You are in one of 2 sections. You're either in the morning lab or the afternoon lab, and you'll want to take a look at your lab time. So make sure you know when you're coming. And I've already sent out an email to each of you that tells you the particular time, given COVID, where you're going to come to lab. So you actually have a very set time period that's already on an email. That was sent out a couple days ago. Also on Tuesday, we have lecture, a traditional lecture, along with Wednesday and Friday. So this is kind of weird. This is a 5-hour class, and one of the questions I regularly ask students is, what makes it 5 hours? What makes one of your classes a 3-hour class? The answer is you usually get an hour of credit for every 50-minute lecture, 50 50-minute lecture a week. So if you have a class that meets Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, let's say at 1 o'clock to 1:50, that would be a 3-hour class. Well, if you're looking right here, we meet for lecture on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. So that's 4 lectures a week. That's 4 hours of credit. Well, where's the 5th hour come from? In the sciences, we get 1 credit for a 2-hour lab. Sometimes 1 credit for a 3-hour lab in chemistry, if you're in general chemistry. So 1 credit for the lab and 4 lecture hours makes 5. Okay. We do nothing on Thursday. Finally, we have to remain very flexible. I've been saying it over and over as we await any change in plans from the college. So right now it looks like we meet in person on Tuesday the 18th when we'll start our labs, but I have plans and I can adjust if I need to if the college makes some decisions, the administration makes some decisions that change those plans. Last spring when I taught zoology, it was completely remote, pretty much until I think the end of the spring semester when we dissected rats. So I can handle it. I don't want to. It's not what I want. I want a lively, interactive class with everybody together and friendly as can be. And it doesn't look like we're going to get all of that this year. I told you that I get to work with wonderful faculty assistants. I have 3, often I get 4, but this year I have 3. And those people are, and you should write these names down and make sure you know who these people are. Jasmine and Morgan are both seniors. This is their final semester. Jasmine is getting ready to prepare applications for medical school. Morgan Zobrist wants to go into a nursing program, and then after practicing maybe a year or 2, she'll go on for getting the advanced status of a nurse practitioner. And that person might be somebody you've met before at a doctor's office. When you go to a family practice office, you might see a regular physician, an MD. Actually, you may also see someone called a DO. That's another kind of physician. Those are called doctors of osteopathy. They practice just like an MD. But because we don't have enough physicians, we are regularly hiring nurse practitioners to substitute and to do an awful lot of the work that a family physician would do. Another way to do that role, other than being a nurse practitioner, is to be a physician's assistant, and that's another route altogether. And we could compare that, and you could ask about it. Also, Dr. Welch could tell you about it. Cheyenne Hunter is a sophomore. What's important for you to know about Cheyenne is that 1 year ago today, she was exactly where you're at. 1 year ago today, Cheyenne was taking my zoology class. So, what do my TAs do for me? Oh my gosh, the list is long. But one thing they do for me is something I can't do. I can never take my own class. So right now, I'm trying to guess what it is to listen to Zalisco talking and introducing zoology and trying to understand what I've got planned. And that's my dog, by the way, whining in the background, trying to get in the room. That's Zoe, probably, because one of them wants to come in. In any case, my TAs provide that perspective of what's it like to take my class. And Cheyenne just had it last year, and Cheyenne had to do a lot of stuff that was remote. So goodness gracious, she can be really helpful for understanding what this is like. But all three of these TAs are great. My advice is to get them to know them as soon as possible. I don't know how that will be. I don't know what opportunities we're going to have in the weeks ahead. But boy, as soon as you can, just visit with them. Just say hi. Say, hi, I'm in your Zoe class. And then tell them who you are, a little bit of your interests. And the point is to get to know them before you need them. Okay? I don't know if you've thought about that. But isn't it a good idea to know your helpers before you're in trouble? Make connections. Now, if you think about it, if you've already sort of known who at least one of these people, known one of these people, then when you need some help, maybe getting ready for a test or understanding something about the class, it's going to be easier for you to go and ask them for some kind of help. And that's what I want for you. That's what I'm trying to help you transition to college and realize that you want to lay this foundation of connections, of knowledge, of your resources before you need them. I don't know if any of you have gone camping, or even, goodness, just go on a trip and visit a city. I've had the luxury of traveling all over the world. Just got back from New Zealand only 2 years ago, spent a month there traveling all over, or Iceland or Europe, China I mentioned. When I get to any of these places, hotels or campsites, one of the first things I do is walk around the area and understand where my resources are. Where will I get water? If I need firewood, where will I get firewood? If I have to go buy something, some kind of food, where will I buy that? If I'm in a nice hotel, where are the restaurants nearby? Where is the transportation? Is there a bus? Is there a taxi? Is there a train? Can you walk? These are all things you need to know. And in Google, most of us can Google Maps and do searches of what's around us. That's what I'm saying here, guys. Get to know your resources. Get to know your options, what's available to you. This is all very, very wise. Routinely, when we're in person, one of my bragging points about my TAs is that they allow us to have many, many hours of evening study sessions. Now, I'm not announcing this because I don't know the circumstances that we're going to be in here, but routinely we have study sessions for 4 hours a night, 6 to 10 p.m., for 5 nights a week, Sunday through Thursday. The only nights we don't is Friday and Saturday because nobody comes in. For those of you that had calculus, 5 nights, 4 hours each, well, that's 20. Holy cow, 20 hours a week. Well, I don't know what in-person is going to be like this year, but I'm going to try to see once we get going here if we can do that 4 hours a night for 5 nights of the week. We will post all of that on the Zolab door when we get it figured out. The TAs who will be at those particular times. So what times are available and what TAs will be there will be posted on the Zolab door. And of course, this is all going to be subject to change as we adjust. All right, this is where you really need to get out the syllabus. You can hear that. I got the syllabus right here in my hand. If you could see, that was kind of funny. Well, before we go on, I think it's really important. Remember this adjusting to college thing? What is a syllabus? Okay, so you've already had, I think, at least one semester of college. So you've had syllabi before, and you probably have a really good idea of what is a syllabus and how it was used in other classes. My question to you is, what do I think is a syllabus? So I've prepared this, what have we got, 6 pages, for goodness sakes? 6 pages on the syllabus. What do I think I'm accomplishing? Okay, what's there? What am I trying to tell you? What is my intent? See, that's pretty good. Why is it important? The answer is I'm laying out the structure of the class, how we'll be doing things, my expectations, and those are pretty important because they're going to be graded. Also things that you can, so let's go through this together. Look at the front page. It's going to be things like basic contact information, also the textbooks and the laboratories, attendance policies, those are good. A note about wearing masks that I think I emailed to you already. Flip over to the second page, as I just did. Grading policies, those are good. Here are your exam dates. Also, if somebody has a conflict. So you have officially 2 weeks through January 26th, Wednesday, January 26th, to let me know if there is a scheduled college event. Yes, that may be sports, but it also could be music or something else that's going on in another class. And by January 26th, so by the end of January 26th, if you let me know of those conflicts, I'm telling you in the syllabus, here in writing, that we'll work it out. Either I'll move the date or we'll figure out what you will do. But we'll try to minimize the impact on you. After the 26th of January, you're going to be expected to take all the tests at those times. There are not going to be tests given at other times. Period. Not happening. Doesn't happen in lecture, doesn't happen in lab. Okay? So, that's really important that you find out about any of the conflicts and you know whatever schedules you can. I have a policy about dropping a lowest score. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Also, a policy of me dropping you from the class. That's not good. But when I started out teaching, I don't know, maybe students were testing me or something, and it's happening with other professors as well. There were some people that were misbehaving pretty badly. So the college is crystal clear that a student who's behaving very, very badly in the class can simply be assigned an F and dismissed from the class. Yep, we can do that. We're a private college, guys. We could require you to wear blue shirts starting tomorrow. We're a private college, guys. So people were making arguments on COVID. I paid attention to all the town halls we had, and I think some people didn't understand that private colleges can impose pretty much whatever rules they want, consistent with their mission. And so, in any case, we don't have to put up with people behaving really, really badly. Likewise, missing without talking to me. So if you miss for one consecutive week or miss more than 4 class periods at any point in the semester, you might also be dropped. Why? Well, I say it right there on the syllabus. It says attendance matters because listening and participating build a class and education. Okay. At the bottom of page 2, I tell you that I can change stuff, and it might just be a single email, and that's what I was telling you about the emails. Now we get to the meat of the matter, and that's page 3. So let me see if I've mentioned anything else. Here's some of the drops. What I'm dropping are 3 different kinds of graded assignments. I have sometimes in lecture, depends on how we're working together, and in person it's more likely if we're in person. I'll have sometimes as frequently even as once a week a 5-point lecture quiz. This will always be at the start of class. It'll probably be about something we covered the day before, and it'll just check your comprehension. Sometimes I have these over classification where you're learning classification, so that'll come later in the semester for those classification. We have a lab quiz that I mentioned already. Some of those, by the way, are 30 points, so 25 to 30 points. And finally, we have 4 regular lecture exams. And what I do is drop the lowest score from each of these 3. So again, those of you who had calculus, 100 plus 25 and 5, well, that's 130 points. You could miss completely 3 days of the semester if we were giving a 5-point quiz, a 25-point quiz, a 100-point exam, and you could still get 100% in the class. Okay? Why do I drop 3 different graded assignments? I'm going to step aside here and let Zoe in before she goes nuts. Hi, Lucy. So why do I drop, coming back, gotta adjust for the dogs. Why do I drop these scores? Because life happens, guys. Because there's just things that happen to us. There's no end. So I hesitate to start giving you examples. But you get sick, right? A car breaks down. Travel plans. You're stranded somewhere. You can't make it. Who knows? In some cases, I had students who wanted to meet a brother or sister who were in the military and they had just a couple days off. Or somebody had a birthday party they just didn't want to miss. Okay, well, some things aren't expected. Some are known. And you take the risk if you choose to drop one of these. If you choose not to take a lecture exam, and then the next lecture exam you have an emergency, well, you're going to be in a bunch of trouble. So never count on I'm just going to drop that score and I'm not even going to study. Well, guys, if that happens, I'm only dropping one lecture exam, one lab quiz, one lecture quiz. And if you miss 2 lecture exams, you will probably need to drop the class. So, do you really want to just not study for a lecture exam and then count on the fact that you aren't going to have any emergencies? And have you thought about the definition of an emergency? The definition of an emergency means it wasn't planned. So, this happens about every other year. I have somebody that blew off a test. They didn't study for it. They chose not to study for it. Then they had a real emergency or a conflict, and they had to drop the class. And this is a 5-hour class. And most of you are taking about 15 or 16 hours. If you're taking 15 or 16 hours and you drop 5, you're not a full-time student anymore. So this is a big deal. And please, this has been a problem, and I really am harping on this because I really don't want you to mess this up. Okay? Just a few notes about the textbooks. And here we are on page 3 of the syllabus that I told you. We use the textbook for lecture exams. And there in the middle of page 3 are the chapters we use, what lecture exam is covered, and the titles of these chapters. So take a look for the first lecture exam. How many chapters are on the first lecture exam? And if you said 1, well, that's very good. And it's the first chapter. One year, some student went to the provost and complained that I'm asking you to know so much in the zoology class. And I saw the provost in the lunch line, and he told me that. This was a past provost. And I said, do you know how many chapters are in the book? And I think there's 55. I said, do you know how many chapters are on the first lecture exam? By the way, how many chapters are on the second lecture exam? 1. Okay. And he said, no. I said, 1. And then he started being angry with me because I'm not asking you to know enough. It was too easy. So a student complained it was too hard, and then he's yelling at me because the class was too easy. Okay? One chapter on the first test, 1 chapter in the second test. Oh my gosh, we work our way up to 2 chapters on the third exam and 2 for the fourth. Okay? So those chapters, what do you need to know? Well, that's right there at the top of page 3. So we got a big, looks like a bee or something flying around there, an image. And just below that, it says for every lecture exam you need to know, and then it goes on and lists 4 things. So I told you, as you got prepared for this to follow along, I told you to also get out the textbook objectives. So my question to you is, how many textbook objectives are assigned for chapter 1? How many objectives do you have out of chapter 1 for the first lecture exam? You could pause now and look it up. But the answer is 43. 43 for 1 chapter? Yep. I want you to know what I want you to know. I want you to know what I want you to know. I could just tell you to know chapter 1, and you don't have to do those objectives, and then you won't have such a good idea. This is me being a nice guy. I'm going through in order, by the way, in the chapter, and telling you what I want you to know. By the way, I said in order. So if you're having trouble finding the answer or the response to the 10th objective, find where in the book the answer is for the 9th objective, find the response for the 11th objective, and the answer for 10 is in between. Okay? So they're all in order. So the last 40, 41, 42, 43 objectives are towards the end of chapter 1. Likewise, the low numbers at the beginning. Notice that it's not just the textbook objectives. So there's 2, 3, and 4 things here that I trust you'll read about and learn about. But boy, oh boy, get to know the organization of this textbook. To save you money, we use the same textbook as a resource for our lab. We don't make you buy a lab manual. We don't make you get some other resource online. You should know that for a typical college science class, people may require a textbook and a lab manual, and the total price could be $300 to $400 for one class. $300 to $400 of books for one class. I've made it so that, first of all, this book is not even the most recent edition, so it should be cheaper. I strongly recommend you get a hard copy. You should be able to buy a used copy really, really cheap. And oh my goodness, guys, you should be saving so much money by using the textbook, first of all, a prior edition, and for using it for the lab. But for the lab, there are also materials that are supportive. We have to-know sheets, so you know that there's a to-know sheet on the portal right now for the Perfor lab. Most labs have textbook objectives for the lab. Okay? So there's textbook objectives for the lecture exam, and there's textbook objectives for the labs. The labs have just a few textbook objectives, not a lot, but those are going to be tested on the lab quizzes. Those lab quizzes start, of course, at the beginning of the class on Monday, and the quiz addresses the prior week's lab. Okay. So there you go. That's what lab quizzes address. The lab schedule is there. It's page 5 of the syllabus. And I tell you, boy, oh boy, there's a lot there on page 5. It's a really good page because I've also indicated the lecture exam dates, pretty much indicated everything that's graded that isn't a tiny quiz. So every lab quiz and lecture exam is indicated there. And for what many people do, they use this page 5 to add to their calendar, whether it's an electronic calendar or a printed calendar, and helps them to organize all the things that they have to do. And that's one of the reasons I do this, guys. You at Blackburn are very, very busy. Oh my goodness. Many bio students, bio majors taking science classes, they got labs, all these assignments. They might be in a sport, and then they have a work program, a job of some sort. So I know you're really busy, and I've always thought that the best way I can respect and help you in your work is for me to have a highly organized class. But that means I'm spending a lot of time here on lecture 2 trying to introduce you to what the heck is all of the details of the class. Okay. Lecture exams. Page 3 tells you what you need to know. What I want you to know, as I say in the syllabus, that essentially half of each lecture exam addresses those textbook objectives. So how many it says how many chapters on exam 1? The answer is 1. How many objectives? We said 43. And that's what you have, the 40, and you have to know that chapter. But information that I probably didn't talk about from the textbook forms about half the lecture exams. I've had a few students over the many years complain to me that, well, Dr. Zelisko, you're putting stuff on the test that you didn't talk about. And you should know that's usually what happens at college. Okay? So when college professors hear that kind of thing, we think, well, yeah, that's probably a difference between high school and college. Because at college, and for your professional exams in the future, you'll have to read materials and answer questions. And it isn't because somebody told you something and you took lecture notes. Okay? How will you study for lecture exam 1? Okay? That's what I want to talk about, how to study. Right now, on the syllabus, please email questions if you have them. I'm going to end here with a couple important points. In the next few days, probably before classes start, I will send out another Google form for you to complete. And it's long. It's a pre-test. It might take you 40 minutes or more to answer. And I want to tell you about why I do this pre-test. It's for me and it's for you. Okay? The pre-test is asking questions generally about your knowledge. I'm always interested in culturally even what you know so that I can relate subject material to you. For example, in the bottom of a sailboat, underwater, is a great big ridge that's called a keel. It could be 5 or 6 feet or more long. Okay. I don't know how many of you know what the bottom of a sailboat looks like. Here we are in Illinois. So if I'm going to try to relate something to you, I have to know what you know. Okay. It turns out that there's a keel just like that on the chest of a turkey. So as you carved up a turkey for the holidays, maybe, on either side of the breast is a giant keel. It's called a keel on the chest. So in biology, we have things that relate to your culture, and I want to know also government, because we're going to talk about a little bit of government and how it's impacted by science. And then I have a lot of questions about your understanding of the philosophy of science, which is probably not something you've learned much about. And then some of the details of exactly how we do some aspects of science. And what I want you to know is that if on the pretest, and it's a Google form so it gets automatically graded for me, if 85% of the class already knows something, well then I don't need to talk about it. Yay, crowd goes wild. However, in some cases like that, if you're in the 15-20% that never learned it, I'm going to tell you how we're going to handle that, okay? If you take a look at the lecture outline for exam 1, there's a study sheet on the back of that lecture outline. We may not then go over some of the things on that study sheet. That's what I'm saying. The pretest may show me that, well, most people already know this. If you don't know it, then as we get closer to lecture exam 1, I'd like you to go see the TAs or talk to me, and we'll try to catch you up on whatever it was that lots of people knew, but somehow you didn't. And guys, there's all kinds of gaps in people's education, so don't feel bad about that. Could be that that wasn't a good day for you and you weren't paying attention. Okay. And I now see that this has already been a very long lecture too. And so what I was next going to talk about is how to study for this class. And I'm going to make another recorded lecture on how to study for this class. And that will be something, even if we meet next week for lecture, not next week, but even if we manage to get together on the 18th for lecture in person, I'm going to count on you have listened to this next lecture on studying. So I'm planning right now, it's the 7th of January, on 3 recorded lectures. So the one I did before the introduction, this one, and then one more on studying and studying advice. And I want you to listen to all 3 of these, plus the introduction to the phylum Peripheral. And I'd like you to do all of those by Monday the 18th, okay? Now the good news is people have responded really, really well when I record lectures because they love it. They can pause, they can listen, they can go back, and hopefully this is working for you. But I also hope we get to meet in person and don't have to do this all semester long. Okay, so I'm signing off right here, and this is where we'll start recorded lecture number 3 for you to watch.